So I made this comment response video in which I posited that putting anime characters into Super Smash Bros. Was justifiable because of how many anime characters are also very successful video game stars, and how many characters that are in Super Smash Bros. Have been featured in anime. I quickly discovered that this was a larger conversation than I'd realized, and people feel pretty strongly about it. But regardless of what they or I might think, Sakurai himself has stated that Super Smash Bros. Will be focused on video game characters exclusively. Obviously, Sakurai can do whatever he wants with his game, but I don't have to like it, and I certainly don't have to buy into the fanboy logic used to justify this limitation. Let me explain what I mean as someone who's been playing these games since the first one came out on the N64. So you've got this franchise that's very clearly dedicated to strictly celebrating Nintendo characters, obviously very appealing to the Nintendo fanboys like me who were reading our Nintendo Power and knowing who all of these characters are. We get to the third game in the series, and the initially controversial inclusions of Sonic and Snake seem to be justified by people because they had been present on Nintendo consoles. So everybody gets used to non-Nintendo characters being in Smash, and we move the bar slowly to characters who aren't even on Nintendo consoles. Now Smash is a celebration of video games, and including characters who started as anime is somehow now obviously too far, even though opening up the conversation to a celebration of video games has pushed the probability of smaller Nintendo favorites like Travis Touchdown, for instance, further away. Now personally, while I could choose to be mad about losing places for Nintendo characters that I love, I do also love plenty of other video games and wouldn't cry about getting to play their characters in Smash. But if we're going to open the floodgates, let's open them all the way. And no, I'm not saying let's start tossing in random anime characters just because they happen to be in a video game, but any character who is by all rights a classic video game character should be allowed into Smash. One of the comments on my previous video argued that putting an anime character into Smash would be like putting a basketball player into the Baseball Hall of Fame because he tossed a baseball once. I can't think of any sentiment more insulting in the face of one of the most prolific and easily recognizable gaming icons of all time, Goku. Dragon Ball started as a manga in 1984 and became a video game franchise in 1986. It hit the NES that same year and had its biggest sales period during the NES and Super Nintendo heyday. There are 89 Dragon Ball games. In total, the franchise has sold 53.5 million copies, which is more than Borderlands, Elder Scrolls, Counter-Strike, Mortal Kombat, Uncharted, Red Dead Redemption, The Witcher, and most of the franchises that I'm going to talk about in this video. And moreover, a lot of these games are beloved, including recent titles like Dragon Ball FighterZ, which is available on the Nintendo Switch. And just to clarify, while Dragon Ball is one of the biggest anime and manga franchises of all time, it's not as though every comparable franchise has just as successful of a crossover into the gaming space. One Piece has grown to be a bigger manga than Dragon Ball ever was, and yet, while it's true that Dragon Ball had more than a 10-year head start, the One Piece franchise has made less than a sixth of the sales. There just hasn't been the same kind of classic games. Dragon Ball soars way above the next highest selling anime-based video game franchise, and way more of its games come up in conversations about the best games on various consoles. Obviously, I'm not in favor of just stuffing characters who are popular outside of gaming into Smash if they have nothing to do with gaming, but Dragon Ball is a major gaming franchise and definitely deserves representation in Smash with the insanely iconic character Goku, who's probably in every single one of those games. Now look, there are plenty of major gaming franchises that I don't think really have a representative character who would fit in Smash. Franchises like NBA or FIFA, they don't really have a primary character. I mean, I guess you could probably throw a John Madden assist trophy into Smash. That would be pretty funny. Maybe Vince McMahon assist to represent the WWE games. Guitar Hero is another one that really, while it has original characters in it, none of them are very memorable or iconic, and the games are mostly carried on the strengths of the songs and the gameplay. But I do have to wonder where we draw the line when we consider what is or isn't an original video game character. A smattering of the biggest video game franchises fall under the umbrella of adaptations of novels by Tom Clancy. That franchise has sold 82 million copies, putting it in the upper echelon of gaming sales. But there's an easy answer to putting Tom Clancy in Smash, which is Sam Fisher, because he's not actually based on a novel. It's just a series of games endorsed by Tom Clancy, I guess. But what if we have a franchise that didn't start as a video game, but does have characters that are original to the video game adaptations or sequels? Thankfully, there's already an example of this in Smash. The Megami Tensei franchise was originally based on a novel. While Persona is arguably a sub-franchise of that and Joker is a game original character, the exact same thing can be said of many iconic characters from the Star Wars franchise. Sure, it started as a series of films, but it's been a video game franchise since 1983 and hit the NES in 1991. There are no less than 170 Star Wars games, and plenty of those belong to original video game sub-franchises, such as Rogue Squadron, which is completely Nintendo exclusive, Knights of the Old Republic, which features arguably more beloved game original characters than some of the characters in Smash, and the LEGO Star Wars series, which could be an excuse to put some of the actual Star Wars characters into Smash, since they are game original interpretations of those characters. The franchise has 82 million sales, which is more than Dragon Quest, Tomb Raider, Halo, Battlefield, and Super Smash Bros. Itself. On that topic, Dragon Ball Z also does have game original characters that you could potentially use over Goku, but I think it would be even more ridiculous to not choose Goku as your go-to guy. What about Geralt? The Witcher was based on a very popular series of novels. Does that mean that he's excluded from ever getting into Smash, even though he's rapidly becoming an iconic video game character in a best-selling franchise? 40 million sales, that's more than Guitar Hero, in only 3 games. I'm not even sure where to begin when it comes to the question of Lego, because Lego is obviously a toy first and foremost, but it's had tons of different video game incarnations, be they the actual toys as a game, or interpretations of plenty of other franchises. Lego Star Wars alone has sold 33 million copies. That's more than God of War, Splinter Cell, and even Star Wars Battlefront. But the Lego property which interests me the most is one that belongs to an even larger franchise than the Lego video game franchise, that being Harry Potter. Originally a set of novels, but it's been a video game series since 2001. There are 8 games that are directly based on the novels, but there are 13 games not based on the novels, including Lego Harry Potter, which is also quite successful. The Harry Potter franchise has 40 million sales, exceeding Civilization, Mario Sports, Kirby, Fallout, or Diablo, and it's hard to argue that there's any video game original characters from this franchise who would be deserving of being included in Smash. It would obviously have to be Harry Potter, but it could be Lego Harry Potter. Then you check off both Lego and Harry Potter at the same time. I'm not saying this is likely. What about Tony Hawk? Because Tony Hawk is a real guy, but there was no specific media franchise based on Tony Hawk until Tony Hawk Pro Skater. It is a video game franchise of which he is the main character, a massively successful one with 30 million sales, 17 games, just under the James Bond franchise and Kingdom Hearts franchises in terms of sales. I don't even know if I can think of an argument against putting Tony Hawk in the game other than that he'd be the first real person, but I mean, R.O.B is a real object that had never even been a character in a game until Smash, so I don't really know where we're drawing the line on that one. Speaking of James Bond, that series has also sold 30 million across 28 video games, beating out Kingdom Hearts, Half-Life, Castlevania, and it's been a video game series since 1982. Making its NES debut with James Bond Jr. in 1991. Now, in case you're wondering, James Bond Jr. is not a video game original character either. But choosing to represent James Bond in a game like Smash would be really interesting, because he's divorced from the context of any of his specific source material. Video games may have been based off of specific novels or used the likenesses of the actors from certain films. But if you're just trying to holistically represent James Bond, how would you go about it? Now, when we think Nintendo and James Bond, we obviously think GoldenEye, one of the most iconic Nintendo 64 games. So maybe a original interpretation interpretation of the GoldenEye James Bond directly based on the source material could be appropriate for Super Smash Bros., as long as we're willing to allow characters based on books to be in the game. Now, what about Marvel or DC characters? Obviously, all these are based on comics. There have been Marvel video games since 1982, and there have been 25 million sales of games from Marvel franchises, more than Ghost Recon, Prince of Persia, or Castlevania. But of course, the majority of those sales really are dependent on just Spider-Man, who showed up on consoles in 1982, hit the Game Boy in 91, and the NES in 93. He's got 34 games, 21.2 million sales, beating out Prince of Persia, Age of Empires, and Castlevania. Castlevania has sold 20 million, by the way. Now, the thing about Spider-Man is that every appearance of him in a video game is essentially an original video game character, because he's always being interpreted differently. Even if they are using the character Peter Parker, for instance, who is from the comics, he always looks different, he's always in a different story. They reshaped the narrative to be an original adaptation for video games. Now, obviously, Spider-Man is not likely to make his way into Smash anytime soon, considering that the latest Spider-Man game was a Sony exclusive. And the only thing that I'm totally barring entry from Smash is exclusives. Final Fantasy VII's on the Switch now, so it's all good. But if we can't have Spider-Man, how about somebody who's sold slightly even more games, that being Batman? He's been on consoles since 1986, and he hit the NES in 1989. And once again, a majority of his incarnations across 41 games are original interpretations of the character. The Arkham series version of Batman is the obvious go-to here. He is a game original version of the character, a massively successful recent franchise that has been on Nintendo consoles. Personally, I don't think there's any good reason for Batman not to be in Smash. And once again, just like in the case with Goku, this is not just because they are iconic characters. They have massive video game franchises. There are not any other comic heroes who come close to Batman or Spider-Man. As I mentioned before, Spider-Man alone was responsible for the majority of Marvel game sales. Things get weirder when we talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! This is also based on a manga, ostensibly. However, the card game that was spawned out of the manga, which went into way more depth than the rules that are presented in the manga and really is its own beast, is the basis for most of the video games. They've been coming out since 1998, they hit the Game Boy that year, and they've been a mainstay on Nintendo handhelds, even hitting the GameCube in 2002. There are 56 Yu-Gi-Oh! Games, with sales figures right between Batman and Spider-Man. Yugi is the obvious iconic character, and honestly, I just want him in the game because his mechanics would be so fucking sick. Obviously, he would summon different monsters to do his attacks, all of his iconic guys. He'd have maybe Exodia for the Smash. Come on, I want Yugi in Smash! There's only one more anime character who I think is big enough as a gaming icon to really make it into the running, and that would be Naruto. Also based on a manga, he's been in video games since 2003, he hit the GameCube the same year, has 60 games. The Wikipedia list of all the games by how much they've sold does not have the overall Naruto franchise. They only list the 16 million sales of just the Ultimate Ninja series. But this is a fairly beloved series. There's a reason that this one alone makes so much money. I think it deserves to be considered an iconic video game franchise. I don't feel that way about any One Piece video games. I don't feel that way about any other shonen video games. It's just Dragon Ball, Naruto, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Who I really think maintained an iconic status as gaming franchise characters. Now, how about something like Ninja Turtles? This started as a comic, but the franchise immediately got away from itself in terms of identity. You could consider any Ninja Turtles to be an appropriate starting point for what you consider to be the beginning of the franchise, and it debuted on the NES in 1989. So it's been a video game franchise almost since the beginning, with 45 games, 19 million copies, that outsells Warcraft, Megami Tensei, Dynasty Warriors, Rock Band, and the mechanic is so obvious. The color select screen lets you pick each of the 4 brothers, and they'd all have pretty much the same moveset, but with differences in the animations that made the text somewhat different. And talking about Ninja Turtles really gets me thinking about multimedia franchises in general, because a big question on my mind is, what about Yokai Watch? From the beginning, this was planned as a Pokemon-esque media empire with all of its elements in development simultaneously, and its most iconic as a 3DS franchise which began in July 2013, 6 months after the manga began serialization. Whereas Pokemon started as a game and franchises like Dot Hack could get away with using, say, Kite since he originated in the game, even if the anime came first, Yokai Watch uses the same characters in all of its incarnations. So does this mean it's banned from Smash despite even stronger connections to Nintendo than many of the characters who've been in several games? How about Hatsune Miku? She's based on a software. She's arguably just as gaming adjacent as R.O.B. She's basically a tool to be applied to games. She's been in games since 2009, hit the 3DS in 2012 and the Switch last year, has 17 games and has sold 6 million copies. I'd like to see Miku in Smash. Who wouldn't? There also have not yet been any appearances from characters that belong to franchises based around their collaborations with non-gaming franchises, like Kingdom Hearts or Super Robot Wars, though each of these has original main characters who I doubt anybody would complain about getting into Smash in some form. Now, without further ado, let me reveal to you my top 5 non-Nintendo characters that need to get into Smash. Number 1 is Minecraft Steve. Huge suite of possibilities with this character. He can build like staircases or something in front of himself. I have no idea what you're gonna do with that, but obviously you need to have the pickaxe and the sword. Leon from Resident Evil. Leon's one of the more iconic characters in the franchise and obviously the hero of Resident Evil 4, one of the most iconic originally GameCube exclusives. Now it's on literally everything, but nonetheless Leon could play kind of similarly to Solid Snake, utilizing the idea of his inventory to give him lots of possibilities. Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat's always been on Nintendo consoles, and yeah, it's more of an adult franchise, but you can do plenty with Scorpion without having to make it too gruesome. You could even have something akin to a fatality but be a goofy version of it, you know? It's just too obvious how much fun it would be to get over here, all your favorite Nintendo characters. Goku, as I said before, needs to be in there. Iconic fighting game character in countless games. And lastly, the Dragonborn from Skyrim. I don't even like Skyrim, but I think this would be hilarious just because obviously Fusroda would be a perfect Smash move. And there you go, that's my argument for who I think should or should not be allowed in Smash. I'm sure you have already let me know what you think in the comments before you even finish the video, so I won't bother asking you to do so. Subscribe to my channel for more stuff from me, and support me on Patreon if you really like what I do. If you just want coverage of current anime, subscribe to the Content channel, and thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.